Is this some kind of joke? Sergeant First Class Marcus Webb's voice cut through the rumble of idling motorcycles on the Fort Meade training course. He stood beside his Harley-Davidson Road King, arms crossed, watching his formation fall apart for the third time that morning. The six-bike presidential escort drill was supposed to be textbook perfect. Instead, it looked like a beginner's riding course. Webb was the newly appointed leader of the military police motorcycle escort team, responsible for training riders who would protect high-value convoys and visiting dignitaries. At 32, he'd earned his position through skill, dedication, and an almost obsessive attention to protocol. But right now, watching his team struggle with a formation they should have mastered weeks ago, his frustration was reaching a breaking point. "Reset!" he barked into his radio. "Johnson, you're drifting too wide on the left flank. Martinez, your spacing is off by 3 feet. This is presidential-level escort work. Millimeters matter." The team groaned but complied, repositioning their bikes for another attempt. The drill was simple in theory. Maintain a tight diamond formation around a VIP vehicle traveling at 60 miles per hour, execute lane changes in perfect synchronization, and adapt to sudden route changes. In practice, it required precision and instinctive coordination that the young riders hadn't yet developed. As they prepared for another run, a distinctive rumble approached from the access road. All heads turned to see an old Harley-Davidson Softail rolling toward the training area. The bike was vintage, probably from the early 1990s, its chrome weathered but lovingly maintained. The rider was older, maybe 70, wearing a faded leather jacket and a simple half-helmet. He had a white beard, long gray hair tied back, and the relaxed posture of thousands of hours in the saddle. Webb's jaw tightened. "Who the hell is that?" Private Chen spoke up. "That's Jimmy Reed, Sarge. He owns the motorcycle shop about 2 miles off base, does repairs, custom work. And he thinks he can just roll onto a restricted training course?" Webb muttered, already walking toward the approaching rider. Jimmy pulled to a stop at the edge of the course and killed his engine. He swung his leg over the bike with practiced ease and pulled off his helmet, revealing sharp blue eyes and a weathered face. "Morning," Jimmy said pleasantly. "Didn't mean to interrupt. I was making a delivery to the MP motor pool and heard you boys practicing. Thought I'd watch for a minute if that's all right." Webb sized him up with barely concealed annoyance. Another old biker living in the past, probably. "Sir, this is a closed training exercise. You're going to need to clear the area." "Understood." Jimmy nodded toward the formation. "Presidential escort drill?" "That's classified," Webb said automatically, though the nature of the exercise was obvious to anyone who knew motorcycles. "Right, of course." Jimmy smiled slightly. "You know, your left flank rider, Johnson was it? He's compensating for a crosswind that isn't there. That's why he's drifting wide. And your rear guard is braking too early on the formation shifts. Makes the whole diamond collapse inward." Webb's eyes narrowed. "With respect, sir, I don't need riding advice from a civilian. We have our protocols and training standards." "Fair enough." Jimmy started to turn back to his bike, then paused. "Though if you're training for presidential escort work, you might want to tighten that formation by at least 2 feet. The Secret Service won't accept anything wider than a 6-foot bubble around the vehicle. What you're running now is closer to 9. There was something in the old man's tone. Not arrogance, not criticism, just the calm certainty of someone stating an observable fact. It irritated Webb more than outright condescension would have. "And how would you know Secret Service protocols?" Webb challenged. Jimmy just smiled. "Lucky guess. I'll get out of your way." He swung back onto his Softail and kicked it to life, but before he could roll away, Private Chen spoke up. "Mr. Reed, didn't you used to do escort work? I thought I heard someone at your shop mention it." Jimmy's smile faded into something more reserved. "Long time ago, son. Different era." "What kind of escort work?" Webb asked, his curiosity now piqued despite his irritation. "Presidential motorcades, military police, 1985 through 2005. The training course went quiet except for the idle of the motorcycles. 20 years of presidential escort work was longer than most riders' entire careers." Webb felt his certainty waver. "Which administrations?" "Reagan, Bush Sr., Clinton, Bush Jr. Some vice presidential details too." Specialist Torres leaned forward. "Mr. Reed, those old Harleys you rode are nothing like what we have now. Our Road Kings have ABS, traction control, electronic suspension." Jimmy nodded. "You're right. Your bikes are better in every way. Safer, more reliable, better braking. So the techniques you used are obsolete, Webb said. Some are, Jimmy agreed. But fundamentals don't change. Physics is physics. A motorcycle in formation responds to the same principles whether it has carburetors or fuel injection. Chen spoke up. Sarge, if Mr. Reed has 20 years of experience, maybe we could learn something? Webb hesitated but recognized an opportunity. Mr. Reed, would you observe one of our runs and offer feedback? If it helps, Jimmy said. Webb positioned his team. The VIP vehicle rolled into position. 6 motorcycles formed up. 2 front, 2 flanks, 2 behind. At Webb's signal, they began. Jimmy watched, his trained eye catching every detail. The formation was decent but lacked fluid cohesion. They were following protocols mechanically. After 2 minutes, Webb called halt. Well? Your team knows the manual. They're hitting marks, but they're riding individually, not collectively. When Johnson adjusts, Martinez should counter-adjust to keep formation tight. Instead, he holds position rigidly, creating a gap. The manual says maintain your assigned position, Webb countered. The manual gives you a framework, Jimmy said. But at 60 miles per hour with a VIP's life depending on you, the formation is a living thing. The best teams don't think, they feel it. They're reading each other's body language, lean angles, throttle response. Webb frowned. That sounds like improvisation. Precision and adaptability aren't mutually exclusive. Jimmy pointed at the course. Mind if I show you? You want to run the course? Just a demonstration. Webb gestured at his Road King. Be my guest. Jimmy settled into the saddle, adjusted mirrors, and fired it up. The modern Harley was smoother than machines he'd ridden decades ago. But a motorcycle was still a motorcycle. I'll run left flank. Put your best rider on right flank. Webb assigned Martinez. The SUV rolled forward, and Jimmy eased the Road King into position. What happened next made every observer silent. Jimmy didn't just maintain formation. He became part of it. His movements were so smooth, so anticipatory. He seemed to know what the driver would do before the driver did. When the vehicle began a lane change, Jimmy was already leaning. When it accelerated, his throttle response was instantaneous but measured. He was constantly adjusting. Tiny corrections that kept formation perfectly balanced. After 90 seconds, Webb called halt. His face had gone from skeptical to stunned. How did you read the driver's intentions before he moved? Jimmy climbed off. You watched the vehicle's nose, suspension load, the driver's head position. You learned to see the decision before the action. Stay loose. Rigid positioning creates gaps. Fluid positioning maintains integrity. Torres leaned forward with interest. Mr. Reed, can you teach us that? Before Jimmy could answer, Webb's radio crackled. Sergeant Webb, this is Major Harris. I'm at the observation point. Who was that on your bike? Webb's face went pale. Sir, that's a civilian consultant, James Reed. Is that Jimmy Reed? The Jimmy Reed? Webb exchanged confused glances. Sir, I'm not sure what you mean. Stay there. I'm coming down. 5 minutes later, Major David Harris stepped out of a staff car. He walked directly to Jimmy and extended his hand. Chief Reed, it's been a long time. Jimmy shook warmly. Major Harris, last time I saw you, you were a young lieutenant learning to ride. Harris turned to the MPs. For those who don't know, Chief Warrant Officer James Reed, retired, was the senior motorcycle escort instructor for the Military Police Corps for 15 years. He trained every presidential escort team from 1990 through 2005. The protocols you're learning? He wrote most of them. Webb felt like the ground had shifted. Sir, I had no idea. Why would you? Jimmy said kindly. I've been retired for 20 years. Harris shook his head. The fundamentals you taught are still our foundation. But we've lost some of the art in favor of science. He looked at Webb. Sergeant, Chief Reed showed more formation intuition in 90 seconds than I've seen from trained teams in full drills. Webb swallowed his pride. Sir, if Chief Reed would spend time with my team, we could benefit significantly. Harris looked at Jimmy. What do you say, Chief? Feel like teaching one more class? Jimmy glanced at the young riders, eager, skilled, but missing that final piece. I've got a shop to run, but I suppose I could spare a few afternoons. Over the next 3 weeks, Jimmy became a fixture at the training course. He didn't lecture or criticize. He rode alongside them, demonstrating techniques that couldn't be learned from manuals. He taught them to read road surfaces, to feel the formation's collective rhythm, to communicate through subtle position shifts rather than radio calls. The transformation was remarkable. The struggling team began moving like a single organism. Their certification test was flawless. The evaluating officer called it the smoothest presidential escort drill he'd seen in a decade. On the last day, Webb approached him. Chief Reed, I owe you an apology. When you first showed up, I dismissed you as just another old biker living in the past. I was wrong. Jimmy smiled. You were protecting your team's training time. Nothing wrong with that. The information being that you're a legend? The information being that experience and technology aren't enemies, they're partners. Your bikes are better than anything I rode. Your safety equipment is superior. But the human element, reading situations, working as a team, trusting instincts, that's timeless. Webb extended his hand. If you ever want to come back and run a drill with us, you've got a standing invitation. I appreciate that. Jimmy glanced at his Softail. Though I have to admit, your Road King is tempting. Might need to upgrade my personal ride. As Jimmy rode away, Chen turned to Torres. Did you see the way he handled that bike? 71 years old and smoother than any of us. It's not about strength or reflexes, Martinez said, having learned the lesson well. It's about understanding the machine so completely that you're not fighting it, you're dancing with it. Webb nodded. And that understanding takes thousands of miles and years of experience. We've got the tools and the youth. He's got the wisdom. Both matter. 3 months later, Webb received an unusual request. A foreign dignitary was visiting the base, and the Secret Service wanted an MP motorcycle escort. The route included a challenging section through downtown Washington during rush hour, narrow streets, heavy traffic, and multiple security checkpoints. It was the kind of high-stakes assignment that could make or break careers. Webb immediately thought of Jimmy. He called the motorcycle shop. Chief Reed's Custom Cycles, Jimmy answered. Mr. Reed, it's Sergeant Webb. I have a situation and I could use your advice. After hearing the details, Jimmy was quiet for a moment. That downtown route is tricky. I've run it probably 50 times. There's a section near 14th Street where you'll have to compress the formation to single file, then expand again. Timing is everything. Would you be willing to ride with us? As an advisor? Sergeant, I'm retired. I don't have current certification. Major Harris is willing to issue you a temporary credential. We could really use someone who knows that route. Jimmy considered this. He'd been happy in retirement, working on bikes, avoiding the stress and responsibility of high-stakes escort work. But he also remembered the young MPs who'd been so eager to learn, who'd transformed from a struggling team into confident professionals. All right, he said finally, but I ride sweep position. I'm there to observe and advise, not to be part of the primary formation. On escort day, Jimmy arrived on his upgraded Road King. The team was assembled, bikes gleaming, uniforms immaculate. Webb briefed the route, then introduced Jimmy to Secret Service agent Torres. She looked Jimmy up and down. You're the legendary Chief Reed? Just Jimmy now, and the stories are probably exaggerated. We'll see, she said with a slight smile. The escort went flawlessly. But at the 14th Street compression point, traffic unexpectedly surged from a side street. Webb, riding lead, held formation rather than compress early. It was right, but meant timing would be extremely tight. Jimmy, riding sweep, saw the problem developing. He smoothly accelerated, closing distance with rear guard, creating a visual cue that rippled forward. Each rider made tiny adjustments, and the team threaded through with barely 2 feet of clearance. When they arrived at the secure facility, Agent Torres approached Jimmy. That save at 14th Street, that was you? The team made the save, Jimmy said. I just gave them information. Without using radio, just through positioning. She shook her head. That's intuitive teamwork we dream about. How long did it take to train that? About 20 years, Jimmy smiled, give or take. After the successful Escort, Harris authorized a formal commendation. But he also created a new position, MP Motorcycle Escort Historical Advisor. Civilian role with minimal hours but significant impact. Jimmy would consult on complex routes, provide advanced training, preserve institutional knowledge. Jimmy accepted, on condition he could still run his shop. Once a month, he'd spend a day at the base, riding with new teams, sharing stories from his presidential detail years. One afternoon, Chen approached him. Chief Reed, you had a 20-year career at the highest level. Don't you miss it? The adrenaline? The importance? Jimmy looked at his Harley, then at the young MPs practicing. I miss the brotherhood, the feeling of being part of something bigger. But you know what? I get that same feeling now. When I see you boys master a technique I taught you, when I watch you execute a perfect formation, I'm still part of it, just in a different way. He swung onto his bike. The mission doesn't end when you retire. It just changes form. You become a link in the chain, passing knowledge forward. That's a different kind of honor, but it's just as important. As Jimmy rode away, the young MPs watched with new understanding. They weren't just learning to ride motorcycles in formation. They were inheriting a legacy, becoming part of a tradition that stretched back decades, carried forward by quiet masters who refused to let the old wisdom die. A few months later, Jimmy was in his shop when a young Marine walked in. He wasn't from Fort Meade. His uniform showed he was stationed at Camp Lejeune. He looked nervous. Mr. Reed, I'm Corporal Davis. I just got assigned to presidential escort training. My instructor, Sergeant Webb, told me that if I'm ever near here, I should stop by and introduce myself. He said you could teach me things no manual ever could. Jimmy smiled and wiped his hands on a rag. Sergeant Webb said that, did he? Yes, sir. He said you were the one who taught him that a motorcycle formation isn't just about following protocols. It's about becoming part of something larger than yourself. Jimmy looked at the young Marine, eager, respectful, carrying forward a tradition. You got time for a cup of coffee, Corporal? Yes, sir. As they sat in the small office at the back of the shop, surrounded by motorcycle parts and old photographs, Jimmy began to teach. Not with lectures or demonstrations, but with stories. Stories about reading the road, about trust, about the weight of responsibility that comes with protecting someone's life. The young Marine listened intently, taking mental notes, absorbing wisdom that couldn't be downloaded or programmed. And in that moment, the chain continued. The knowledge passed from one generation to the next, ensuring that the fundamentals would never be forgotten. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe for more stories of quiet masters who prove that wisdom never becomes obsolete.